Hi, hello! Today I would like to talk about Pat McGrath products that I consider to be highly underrated. Obviously, this is just my personal opinion, tastes may differ, some of you will agree with me highly, some of you will disagree highly, and that's all fine. It's just products that I feel like are flying under everyone's radar for a different type of reason, either because other products in the collection outshone these, or maybe they're somewhat older products, or maybe people on the internet just didn't talk about them enough for whatever reason. So here I am dedicating a separate video to these products because I just want to give them a proper shout out. Okay, I ran up the stairs and I was a little bit out of breath there, so I had to catch my breath. I've written down all the products that I want to talk about. They've been on my iPad here for months already, but I've wanted to do this video for a really long time. I just never got around to doing so. So I thought today I have the perfect opportunity. I have exactly an hour to film and then we gotta go. And I would like to talk about these products. I want to mention there's no ranking involved. I'm not talking about this in any sort of like, there's no rhyme or reason. It's a mishmash of different types of products that I just like wrote down as they came into my brain. So they're not like ranked in any sort of way. They're not arranged in any sort of way. The ones that I'm going to talk about first are not my least or most favorite. They just sprouted into my mind first. And now that we have this chaotic introduction out of the way, we can just talk about the products because that's what you're here for. First and foremost, this was maybe this product is one of my like favorite underrated products that I would like to shout out because it was also the inspiration for this video. So this is Pat McGrath, the Pat McGrath Labs Skin Fetish Highlighter Trio. This is one of her oldest products. I want to say this has been around since one of the like early days of the brand when she still used to do like the little cardboard packaging with the strings over here, and I love everything about this. First, let's talk about the packaging. So this comes in this beautiful cardboard box, which reminds me a little bit of like a high fashion, you know, magazine cutout that was plastered on, and I just think it's so like edgy and editorial and so Pat McGrath Labs. It's like so on brand. But it's really the products in there that are absolutely phenomenal that I would like to shout out. So we're talking about a palette that contains 3 highlighting powders, and these powders come in her baked formula. This is not her baked gelée formula, it's not one of her like special shade type formulas, but it is still baked. It is actually very similar to a lot of the textures that you would find in her like early kits when she had the little eyeshadows that would come, you know, in the little plastic, very like cheap plastic packaging. For example, this is Mercury from her ultra suede brown kit, and maybe another reference point would be the baked Bridgerton blushes that she gave us with the Bridgerton 2 collection, and you can easily recognize this by their domed shape. Mine are still domed, even though I've like worked at them quite a bit, but essentially this is a highlighter trio, and it comes with 3 shades: this deeper bronzy gold, this like white yellow gold, and an iridescent pink. I love these powders because they are this like baked formula. They look like they're meant to melt with your skin. You apply them on and they immediately look like they're one with your skin. They're so lightweight, they're so non-texturizing, they're so flattering. And the specific shades that come in here, I have to say, are also rather unique. And maybe that is one of the reasons that people really don't buy this or don't talk about it anymore, and the hype kind of died down. I think maybe in the beginning when it was released, people talked about this trio a little bit more. I don't think it has been discontinued. If anything, I think she brought it back with the packaging that now looks like this. So it just has like 1 flap, not the 2 flaps. Mine is still in the older one because I bought it already a couple of years ago. But the only reason I would imagine people don't talk about this is because it's not a new product, and we know people on YouTube do not talk about stuff that isn't new anymore, and it is also because it's like slightly funkier types of shades. Now maybe it's worth mentioning that this pinky iridescent shade here is actually present in her Divine Rose 1 palette. It is the exact same shade as this highlighter. The other 2 I don't think she has re-promoted in any of her other products. But the white gold highlighter reminds me a little bit of a somewhat less amped up version of the gold in the Subliminal palette, and you know, this is just like a bronzy gold. And what I love about these highlighters, besides the beautiful texture that they have on the skin, is how you can play around. Like you can apply them quite sheerly, and they are not going to look as pigmented, as scary as this. Especially like the two lighter shades have a bit of like this grayish sort of base to them. So if you apply too much, it is going to appear a little bit like you have a gray cast on your cheekbones. But what I like to do with these basically is mix and match. If I'm going for like a somewhat more like golden warm cheek, I'm going to mix these two together. Sometimes I will mix these two together, but my absolute favorite thing in the world is to actually just dip my brush like this into all three of these and basically create my custom, you know, peachy pink sort of highlighter. I don't think that I can really show you like this on the back of my hand because the way the brush picks these up is a bit different than my finger. But when I go into the three different powders and I just apply them on my skin mixed together, it creates the most beautiful peachy pink highlighter. That's a trick I actually learned from Alex Sonnell a couple of years ago. What I also really enjoy doing with these powders is using them as inner corner highlights if I'm in a rush and I'm just doing like a one and done look and I don't really have time to fuck around with opening a palette for an inner corner highlight. I will just use one of these. I will actually sometimes even use them as toppers for eyeshadows. For example, this gold one here has like really like a... This one doesn't, but these two have a little bit of sparkle to them. But it's not Astral Blitz level type of sparkle, it's toned down VR kind of sparkle. It's a very elegant of glimmer on your eyelid, so you're not really adding that much texture, you're adding just a little bit of like a twinkle effect. So if you have an eyeshadow that you're going for like for a one and done look and you would like to create maybe a bit of like a duochrome effect or add a little bit of sparkle to it, I will also add one of these two powders over top of that. This one is quite smooth, doesn't really have that much sparkle to it. It has the very interesting duochrome flip, but not really any sparkle. But definitely out of all the products that I'm going to talk about today, this one has to be the one that I consider to be the most highly underrated. And I guess it is because it's a very like old product. She has come out with a multitude of other highlighters since then, and a lot of them are in like less funky colors comparatively speaking to these, but I just think these are so interesting and so unique, and you can absolutely like mix and match them to create really interesting effects. And it's such a like multifunctional, versatile product delivered in an absolutely stellar formula. I love this highlighter trio. If she's still selling it on a website, and especially if you can get it on sale, honestly, I would highly recommend it. Okay, so this next product is an eyeshadow palette, and I feel like people have been getting a bit around to appreciating this eyeshadow palette for what it is. And we're talking about Mothership for Decadence. Now, when Mothership for Decadence was released, Pat made a little bit of a detour from her usual 10-pan eyeshadow layout, and instead of giving us a combination of mattes, satins, metallics and the corner of the Blitz Astral VR shades, she gave us all pure metallic shades, except for like maybe one or two, like this purple shade here and this blue, which are a bit more of like that satin formula. The rest are high shine metallics. And obviously people, and by people I include myself as well, we were all very distracted by the glitter of the Blitz Astral VR shades, and we were not able to fully appreciate the absolute majesticness that the Decadence palette is. It has taken me quite a few years, and this palette went from being one of my least well appreciated and like lowest motherships in my ranking to, I want to say this is now ranking at the 4th position or the 3rd position in my Pat McGrath palette rankings. I adore Decadence. First and foremost because the textures that you're getting in here are sublime. This is the metallic formula from Pat McGrath Labs that I truly miss. She has stepped away from this formula in favor of like a more drier, crumblier and not as like creamy, goes on forever, elegant type of metallic, and I don't really understand why. These metallics are phenomenal. They are just some of the most beautiful textures in terms of a metallic eyeshadow that you have ever felt, and they are smooth. They blend out easily if you want them to be like one and done moments on the lid. They pack a punch if you want them to be like high shine metallic eyeshadows, and I think another reason why this palette flies a little bit under the radar is because people want a palette that does everything. They want to have the transition shade, they want to have the deepening shade, they want to have their neutrals, they want to have their maybe pop of color. And this is essentially a palette of jewels. It's a palette of pops of color. It's a palette that you go into to use specific shades. That's not to say that you can't do full looks with this palette. I'm not saying that, because that's actually not the case. You can do a plentiful of looks just using this palette. But obviously, because of the more colorful nature of Decadence, you can't really do many office-friendly looks. And what happens is that if you're a first-time Pat McGrath buyer, or you're someone who leans more into like the neutral side of things, you're going to go on the website, you're going to see that this doesn't have any Blitz Astral VR shades, it only has colorful metallics, and you are going to easily, you know, disregard Decadence. You're going to easily put baby in the corner, and that's not where Decadence belongs. Decadence is a gorgeous palette, but it's a slow burn. This is a palette that you need to get, use, and it grows on you, and it grows and grows until it like nestles underneath your skin, and you can't stop thinking about Divine Mink, you can't stop thinking about Lapis Luxury, and you've never seen something as unique as Inferno over here. And what I've noticed that Pat McGrath tends to do with these sort of like underrated palettes in her collection is she tends to reintroduce them and re-promote them with her Star Wars collections. At least that's my impression, given that Decadence was our first Star Wars mothership and Midnight Sun was the second Star Wars mothership, and based on the fact that I think those are probably two of the most underrated Pat McGrath motherships, I think this is her way of like reintroducing the palettes, reinvigorating a little bit the interest into them, like making people talk about them a bit more so that maybe they can finally be appreciated. But trust me when I say, do not underestimate Decadence. It is a beautiful palette. I've got another palette here that very much flew under the radar when it was released, and I think to this day it sort of like flies underneath the radar, and that is the Blitz Astral Quad in Iconic Illumination. So when these Blitz Astral Quads were released, one, we didn't know that this would be a one-time occurrence, so we operated under the spoiled impression that we're going to get many more of those, so who needs to buy the neutral one? And second of all, because this is a more toned down color story and the other two color stories were a little bit more appealing, one of them being more colorful because there was a blue, purple, you know, the gorgeous green, and the ritualistic rose, which contains these beautiful like wearable pinks. This one kind of got lost in the mix because it's a little bit more subtle, a little bit less in your face in terms of the colors. But and I'm very happy that recently Alicia Archer did her ranking of her quads and once again reaffirmed in my mind that she truly is a kindred spirit when it comes to Pat McGrath Labs, because she also ranked this quad really high, even though at the time that it came out, I think like most people rated it the lowest and most people considered it even somewhat of a dud. I never could understand why people would say anything like this, because Iconic Illumination is iconic. I will say this, I don't wear the red eyeshadow in here, the Blitz Bordeaux shade, all that often because I just don't wear red eyeshadow on the regular. But the three neutrals in here are eyeshadows that I have used to death. And I'm not really sure you will be able to see the indentation that I have in the brown shade here, because I love using this as an outer corner highlight or as a smoked out eyeliner because it has the most beautiful tone to it. It's a little bit more of like a cooler toned brown with the smoky base to it. And maybe another reason why people were not super into this quad is that three of the shades in here are in the Blitz formula, and that formula is not sparkly. That formula is very smooth. Sometimes it is a little bit more shiny, sometimes it's not as shiny. For example, the brown and the red shade, I would not necessarily consider them to be like very sparkly or high metallic shades. They're just very smooth, which makes them very versatile. The eyeshadow that I consider to be a little bit more impactful is this beautiful neutral like orangey bronzy shade here, and this is like the most awkward angle that I could think of to swatch this, so let me just swatch it like this. But this shade has a little bit more impact to it, but again you can see it is not necessarily a very sparkly shade. However, who needs more sparkly shades when you have Astral Gold Allure in here? Astral Gold Allure is probably one of my favorite. Is this Astral Gold Allure? Yes, it is Astral Gold Allure. I think of Astral Gold Allure as the Astral Solstice 2.0. Astral Solstice is a beautiful shade. We're talking about the sparkly Astral Topper from the Divine Rose 1 palette that was also in the Midnight Sun palette. It is a beautiful shade, but Astral Solstice is a little bit too cool toned for my taste. So if your taste is leaning towards the really cool tones, I'm guessing Astral Solstice is your perfect topper shade that goes with everything. But for someone who has slightly warmer tones to the skin, Astral Gold Allure is my perfect, you know, Astral Solstice type shade, because this invokes in me the same kind of feelings that Dior Nude Glow highlighter does that I can't shut up about this past year, which is light champagne gold, the type of gold that doesn't lean too warm or it doesn't lean too cool. It is just perfectly neutral and balanced. If you know her Astral formula, you know exactly how sparkly and dimensional and just mesmerizing Astral Gold Allure looks on the lids. But I don't understand why people disregard this color story, because you can do so much with this. Not to mention if you decide to pair it with other palettes. I actually pull out this palette quite often to just use the deep brown here, because I love the texture of these blitz shades as liners, because they're so smooth and you can very easily blend them out, and I just love the tone of this brown. I will very often use this one as a one and done moment. Sometimes I will put this one over top or something else over top. Like I said, I should probably be playing around a bit more with the Blitz Bordeaux shade, but again, this was released as a holiday collection, so I know why she put this specific eyeshadow in here. Would I have preferred a different tone of a neutral shade? Probably. But with that said, maybe some people enjoy having the red in here, like the red and the gold, make a beautiful, you know, Christmassy type moment. So I totally understand why she chose for this color story, but I will never understand why people didn't enjoy this palette and appreciate it for what it is. And I've said this before and I will say it again, there are neutrals and there are neutrals, and I think when Mother really wants, she can deliver the most beautiful neutrals out there. Okay, speaking of underrated quads, let's talk about another quad that I think people just totally didn't understand and it didn't find its way to their hearts. And we're talking about the Fleur Fantasia quad that was part of her holiday collection for the year 2020, I want to say. So when this came out, I think it got a little bit lost in the crossfire for a variety of reasons, but first and foremost because it is not exactly a very holiday inspired color story. It is the epitome of a pastel spring palette, but not at all a holiday palette. On the one hand, I can kind of understand why people swept the Fleur Fantasia under the rug, and I have to say, out of the three quads, if I had to rank them, I would still rank Fleur Fantasia at the bottom, because I still, you know, prefer some of the other shadows in the other two quads a bit more. But with that said, I think this quad still remains very much underrated and unappreciated in her collection for what it really is, and that is the perfect condensed version of pastels. This is beautiful pastels. Pastels are not easy to do. Pastels have been done by other brands. Other brands have failed at delivering pastels. What I also think somewhat elevates this quad above the other two is that you can use this on your face as well. This shade makes for the perfect blush. This shade makes for the absolute most perfect, like peachy, pinky, champagne sort of highlighter. I've actually used both of them on my face. I think maybe in the video where I first demoed this palette, I definitely used this one as a highlighter. But I also use it as an inner corner highlight, as a very like subtle lid shade. This sparkly pink shade here is also a very pretty moment that you can layer over top of literally any of the other three shades that are in here. And then we have this lavender shade here, which, trust me, is probably one of the most perfect, most ethereal, most fairy-like lavender blues that you've ever seen. I absolutely love this eyeshadow. It makes for such a incredibly beautiful like inner corner highlight moment. I cannot even tell you how much I love it. I agree that Fleur Fantasia is a specific moment, you know, in the year, a specific vibe. It's not a palette that you're going to pull out for on the daily, but I would still rank Fleur Fantasia a lot higher than some of the quads she's been giving us lately. I would rank this miles above something like Passion Fleur, for example, both in terms of the formulas and the color story. So to me, this remains another one of her highly underrated quads that like somehow went under the radar because people got distracted by the other two. But in the grand scheme of things, if you consider her whole collection of quads, I still think this is a really good one. Switching it up a little bit from eyeshadows to a lipstick. Let's talk about my beloved Rouge 8 Matte Trans Lipstick. This was released last year with her Lunar New Year collection, and it featured this lipstick, which is a completely new shade, and a re-release of her Voyeuristic Vixen Quad in red packaging. And because I'm a sucker for Voyeuristic Vixen and red packaging, I purchased the whole set. And I have to say, Rouge 8 came into my life and like swept me off my feet. And then for whatever reason, I was the only person on the internet, I feel like, talking about this lipstick. I've literally not seen anyone demo this lipstick, let alone include it in their favorites, let alone rave about it and have the same intense feelings that I have for it. And I just don't understand why. Because first of all, the packaging of this lipstick is an absolute masterpiece. It is the beautiful red lacquer with the lips and like the little golden things coming out of here, but the actual bullet itself is a beautiful masterpiece to admire. Look how gorgeous that is. And if the packaging wasn't enough, like look at the color of this lipstick. It is just beautiful. It is such a unique undertone of red. It's not a classic red, it's not a burgundy red, it is not an orange red. It is a sort of like a more vibrant version of Fever Dream. If you have Fever Dream from Pat McGrath Labs, it is a very similar type of red. It's a bit of like that terracotta, slightly coral type of red, and it just looks so flattering and so vibrant, and it comes in the beautiful, comfortable matte trans formula. And I will never understand why people aren't talking about Rouge 8. Rouge 8 is a masterpiece in every single way. So it beats me. Like, I don't understand. Maybe because of like this collection came after the new year and people were a little bit like shopped out and a little bit done after all the holiday releases. It didn't come with a lot of like bells and whistles or something. And it was right before the Valentine's Day collection, and you know, Lunar New Year maybe is a bit more of a specific vibe. Not everyone will buy a Lunar New Year collection, but Rouge 8 is a very underrated lipstick. I highly recommend it, and if I'm not mistaken, now it's just part of her regular matte trans lineup. It doesn't really come in this packaging anymore. I think the Lunar New Year packaging went on sale at some point. Probably that collection is now gone, and you can still find the color, but then with her normal black lacquer packaging. Alright, then let's talk about two items that were released in the same holiday collection in the same year. So these are the blush in Nude Venus II and the highlighter in the shade Venusian Nude. So these were released in the same year that you released these absolutely horrible quads that I hated with my guts. The Bronze Borealis and the one with the MAC Blue Brown duochrome type shade. I hated both of those so very much, and because I hated the quads so much, I was just so flabbergasted that people didn't talk enough about the blush and the highlighter that were part of this collection, because the blush and the highlighter are actually phenomenal. Nude Venus II is such an interesting shade of blush. Nude Venus II is sort of like an iteration of her classic Nude Venus shade, which is, you know, part of her regular lineup, but it has a very interesting sheen and sort of like a little bit of a duochrome going on. So it has the peachy base of Nude Venus, but it has that little like flash of cooler toned pink when you turn in the light, and because it has a beautiful sheen on it, it also looks very like natural and very healthy on the skin. And I again don't think people really talked about this blush. I don't think anyone ever shows it on their channels. I don't think anyone bought it, or like very few people bought it, and the few people who bought it never really talk about it anymore. And this is one of my favorite like more like winter type of blushes when I'm doing looks that feature more cooler toned eyeshadows, and I want to have a blush that is not necessarily super cool toned, but it has a bit of like a pink flash to it. Nude Venus would be my choice for blush. And again, I don't know why people never talk about this. It is beautiful. And on that same note, Venusian Nude. Not only are people not talking about this highlighter, I think people didn't like this highlighter. And that blows my mind. It is the highlighter that I'm wearing today. It is one of my most favorite highlighters that Pat has ever released. I think the general consensus was that Venusian Nude is too glittery, And while there is glitter in this highlighter, I don't think it's the offensive type of glitter. I think you can buff it into the skin to look extremely natural. You can wet it a little bit with Fix Plus or whatever other fixing spray you want, and it just melts with your skin. And there are so many things that are really going for this highlighter. One being the texture. This is her baked texture. This is her like beautiful baked gelée texture that she refuses to give us as of this past year, and I don't know whether it's ever coming back. So for one, I will cherish this highlighter because it comes in a formula that I don't even know if we're going to see anymore. But what is really special about this highlighter is the tone. Can you see how beautifully neutral that is? It is not warm, it is not cool, and it literally works with any sort of like blush or look that you're going for. You're going for a cool toned look? Great, Venusian Nude will work. You're going for a very warm toned look? Venusian Nude got you covered. It's just an exceptional texture, a beautiful, like universally flattering color that I think will also work across different types of skin tones, and it boggles my mind that people hate it on this highlighter. Not only is it underrated, people hate it on it. I don't know, people are hard to please, and apparently I'm not that hard to please. This is one of my favorite highlighters ever in my life, period. I love it. And last but not least, we're going to talk about another quad. We're going to talk about Interstellar Icon, which was in the same collection as Fleur Fantasia. Now, I will not go and insult everyone by telling them that Interstellar Icon was an underrated quad, because I actually have the feeling that out of the 3 quads that were released that year, Interstellar Icon was the crowd pleaser, and with good reason. Interstellar Icon is beautiful. But what I think happened here is that people got really distracted by the beautiful like blue purpley duochrome, by this gorgeous, very unique sort of brown over here. This shade didn't really move anyone's heart because it was in the Decadence palette, so it was a re-promote. But the shade that nobody, literally nobody, except for me, ever talks about is this beautiful neutral champagne over here. This is the shade Golden Polaris, and I can swatch Golden Polaris for you, but again, it's one of those things that you have to put on your eyes in order to fully be able to appreciate it. Now, luckily, I've done plenty of content with the Interstellar Icon quad, so I'm sure that you can find a video on my channel where I have used Interstellar Icon. But even now, I can see in my viewfinder that this eyeshadow is blinding you. It is blindingly beautiful. There is something about the tone of this shade. It's a light champagne with peachy pink, you know, the kind of like neutral tones that I'm really a sucker for, like the peachy pinks, but it also has that otherworldly glow to it. It is so stunning, and nobody ever talks about Golden Polaris. Literally every time people open this quad, it is to talk about more specifically the blue purple duochrome here. And I was probably the least impressed by the blue purple duochrome in here, because we have blue purple duochromes, we have blue purple duochromes from Pat McGrath, and we even have them in her baked formula. So I didn't really get what the big deal was with another blue purple duochrome. Yes, it's a beautiful eyeshadow, the formula is really nice, but to me, the real standouts in this palette were the brown shade, the neutral shade here, and without a doubt, absolutely exceptional to me is Golden Polaris. But again, nobody ever talks about it, and I will never understand why. Alright peeps, and that pretty much wraps up this video. These were all the products that I currently consider to be highly underrated in Pat McGrath Labs collection. I'm sure that I may have missed some, and if I stop recording this video now, I'll be like, oh, but this is also underrated and that is also underrated. But on the other hand, we also don't want to be here for another 3 hours. We can do a part 2 at some point. But I'm very curious to hear your opinion. What do you think about these products? Do you think that they're highly underrated? Do you have any of them? What do you think about them? And what is in your opinion a highly underrated Pat McGrath Labs product? I definitely think this can be one of the most interesting discussions that we've ever had in my comment section, so I can't wait to chat with you. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!